there are probably some objective challenges
with
this show.
A couple little changes here and there, and everything just falls apart.
The actor is responsible for pulling the most out of what they are given, but they cannot be held responsible for creating something out of thin air.
I was literally counting things that happened off screen that you should have showed us in a scene.
6 months before this was released, Netflix absolutely nailed it in the One Piece live action.
How is this happening? It's a ship. It's a ship. I'm crying over a ship. Welcome back, everybody, to Frame of Mind, where psychology and filmmaking meet at the intersection of storytelling. I'm Jordan. I'm a video editor.
My name's Curtis. I'm a psychotherapist.
And Curtis, today we're taking a look at the live-action remake of Avatar. The last time I ever trust Netflix with a live-action adaptation.
Oh.
Book 1, what are we doing with this franchise?
Oh, no.
Episode 1, how to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory.
My goodness, you seem like you've been hurt by this.
Okay, back up here. You told me about Avatar: The Last Airbender, the children's show, the animated series, and I'd never watched it up until recently. And so I binged the entire thing, and I fell in love with it.
Yep. I'll pause you here for a second, because I think you're about to dive in.
I am, yes.
I want to ask you a question first.
Oh, please do.
I want to, before we dive into the actual show itself,
yes,
I want to get a taste of your experience of it.
Okay.
And I want to ask you a very specific question.
Okay.
We're going to go back to something that you told me about when we were working on writing scripts and filming, which is caveman.
Yes.
So I want to know, tell me, what was your experience of watching the live action in 5 words or less? That kind of condenses and summarizes your personal experience.
Can I do 6?
Sure, that's close.
Tell, don't show, style over substance.
Interesting.
That is entirely what it is, in my opinion.
So what I want to know too is, because that's more about what the actual show is.
Yes.
But I want to know what your experience was. What was the experience of Jordan like? If I didn't know what you were watching, and I was just looking at Jordan while you were watching it,
yes,
what was that feeling like for you?
Disappointment.
Yeah.
I'm not a parent, but imagine that you have a child. And that child is given the world to them on a silver platter.
Yeah.
Everything. They come from a rich family. They're intelligent. They've got everything is going for them.
Yep.
And then they get a D- on a test. And not even that far. A B. And you're just you know what? Acting was great. Costume design was fantastic. The CGI, the bending, it's it was all really good. But it's just you had something written for you that was flawless, and then you tinkered and toyed with it and made it worse, and it's just what are you doing? I had so much expectation for you because you had everything laid out in front of you. The easy part was done for you.
Yeah.
I don't want to offend anybody. It feels like it was lazy. Yeah. And it feels like it was something that took something that was destined for success. I used snatching defeat from the jaws of victory for a reason, because it's there was no reason for this to fail from a story perspective. In the past, everybody rags on the M. Night Shyamalan version of Avatar, and it's that one is an egregious abomination, but it was an egregious abomination in areas where it makes sense.
Yeah.
Limitations with the visuals that you could pull off. There's, little jokes, little memes about how Aang's character didn't even know how to say his own name properly.
My name is Aang.
You can rag on that for all it is, but it's it was a cohesive mess.
Yeah.
Versus this, it felt like everything was great except for the one thing that really mattered.
Yeah.
And that's what really got to me.
So I want to pull the reins back just a little bit, because it feels like you're already diving in.
I
have a feeling I'm going to have to do this a lot this episode.
Whoa, buddy.
Easy,
Settle
Bessie.
down there.
I have a 5-word experience of the show.
Okay.
My experience was pushed hard to keep watching.
Are you saying that, or are the writers saying that?
No,
just keep watching, please. I'm begging you.
My experience was I had to try really hard not to stop watching the show.
Yeah.
I feel like there were, and we'll probably look at several of these points, but there were a number of points during the episodes where if we had not been having to watch this to review it for this podcast, I would have turned it off.
Yeah.
So there were a handful of points like that I think they epitomize some of the challenges I think you are going to be getting at, that I think we're probably going to really agree on for this.
Okay.
Before we dive into it,
yes,
I want to look at, because this is kind of the first time we have been a little bit cherry picking the shows that we bring on here.
Yes.
And we've been talking a lot about things that we really like. This
yeah.
is maybe going to be the first one where there's going to be a bit of a deviation from that.
Minus the Rings of Power, but we'll just let that one aside.
But this is like the primary focus. The big one
Yes.
is a little I want to actually look just briefly first at when we criticize something, how do we do it? Because I feel like these days with the wonderful parody that the internet brings in terms of it allows criticism to come not just from people who are labeled as expert critics, but also from the every person.
Yeah.
A challenge that I think I see with that is that the expertise of the activity of criticism really gets watered down.
Yep, I agree.
And so instead of just being this sucks and we're going to dunk on this thing for an hour and a half, I want to pose maybe even like a future orientation for any criticisms that we do.
Okay.
And I don't know if you're going to agree with this or not, but I think when we criticize something for not being up to par or not being good or having flaws or having issues, I think there's two things that we should probably keep in mind and stay focused on. One is to be specific.
Yep.
Like if we're going to criticize something, what exactly is it? Can we bring examples rather than just kind of painting a broad brush and saying this whole thing is bad? Like point out the exact moment where you notice that the problem exists. And two, is it constructive? I actually think that like criticism can be building of the art, the artist, and the art form.
I agree.
And so if we're bringing in at least like, even if it just looks like, how could you have done this better? Like, here's an example of what something different would look like that would fix this problem or resolve this thing, instead of just kind of blowing it up and leaving a charred wasteland and saying like, okay, have fun, without offering like, here's the beautiful budding plant coming out of this mess that, you know, whatever degree people want to listen to this and take into their own media and projects could be in the future, right?
I think that's a very wise way of going about it. Maybe I'll not, I won't rein things back, but I'll contextualize it a little bit. It probably sounds like I hate this with a burning passion, and that's not what it is. It's more like, son, I'm a little bit disappointed. I expected more of you.
Yeah.
But it's also the idea that it's the book 2, book 3 got announced that they were going to be renewed. So they're doing a season 2, a season 3 officially.
Okay.
So this is all coming from the con. I love how like I was like, I hate this, and now you're just like, oh no, there's a season 2 and a season 3.
So the problem is that after watching season 1, my pretty firm stance right now is that I won't be watching following seasons.
Yeah, fair enough.
I have some insights.
Won't be watching legally, at least. Sorry.
I have some insights as to why we might not expect any positive changes going forward.
I think that's unfortunately probably true. I'd be interested to hear about your logic as to why you think that's the case.
I will be sharing some not so secret but secret evidence that I have. So, if we are going to be criticizing this disappointing child of ours,
yes,
can we at least do a little bit of a compliment sandwich first and like start with let's at least start with what, if anything, did you enjoy about the show? I think there was one thing that you mentioned earlier, which was like costume designers. Wonderful job. You guys you killed it on this one. You absolutely knocked it out of the park.
Yeah. I would say, okay, I'm spoken like a true therapist. You said all the things that you don't like. Try some positive reinforcement.
I can't get out of that zone.
I'll do your compliment sandwich, and I'll do a sandwich within a sandwich. There's so many things that I think were good and bad about it, just from a very surface level perspective. I think I mentioned before that like the biggest notable thing is that the CG and the bending actually looks great.
Yeah.
Like it looks really good.
They did well with that.
They took the problem that happened in the previous iteration and they fixed it, and they actually made it better than I would have expected. So hands down, all the CG artists, all the VFX artists, everybody who worked in any sort of digital design, like congratulations. A lot of the casting choices were spot on.
Yeah, for sure.
I think that Firelord Ozai could not have chosen a better actor. I think Paul Lee and Uncle Iroh was aesthetically a great choice.
Yeah.
I think
theoretically it's good.
from a visual perspective, from the energy that he kind of exudes, he is a perfect Uncle Iroh. I didn't like some of like the maybe more of the writing directions that he was probably pushed towards.
Yeah, we'll get into that for sure.
I would love to sit down with him and be like, if you're given a blank slate, what would you have taken to the table?
Yeah.
Then like, I would be so interested to hear about that. Gordon Cormier, the kid who played Aang, he's Aang. Like, he feels like Aang.
Yeah.
He's amazing.
Yeah. He was
Love
a good
him.
selection.
Oh, great. Yeah.
I thought really more of a niche role, but like I love the actress that they got to play Suki.
yeah.
I thought she was a phenomenal fit.
Ozai or her, best casting decisions, in my opinion.
Yeah. Were there any changes that you saw them make that you actually liked?
I liked the very first introduction. I liked,
the intro scene where it doesn't start at the iceberg, but it starts.
Yeah.
I think there were actually a few that I thought worked, or on paper they could have worked.
Okay.
So like the changes that they made to Admiral Zhao's character, where he was a little bit more conniving and underhanded.
Oh, yeah.
And a little bit more of like a playing nice at first.
Yeah.
I thought if you're going to change the character, that was great. And the actor did a great job of portraying that.
Yep.
So if you're going to change him, I thought Zhao was actually a really strong character.
Yep, fair.
I actually, it's funny because this one particular scene is very juxtaposed. But when Iroh is at his son's funeral, the interaction that he has with Zuko, I love that as an addition.
Yes.
However well or poorly it's pulled off, I was like, that's a great way to introduce some more context to the relationship between those two. If that scene had not started with what we'll probably talk about as being one of the key moments of like, oh, this is bad.
Is it true he abandoned the siege?
Yes, after his son was killed.
So his son dies a hero and he'll be forever known as a coward.
So it was like, it went from a 0 to that's like a 7. That's nice. So very juxtaposed, very give and take.
Yeah.
So those pieces I liked.
With that scene in particular too, though, I wonder, I can't get out of this mindset where I don't know how much of the feeling that I feel from that scene is because of everything else that I'm bringing from my knowledge and interaction with these characters beforehand.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how much of a fresh slate mind me would have felt in that scene.
Well, that's an interesting thing for both of us too, right? Is because neither of us are ever going to be able to step into the shoes of somebody who's coming to the live action first, before having the Nickelodeon show.
True. Yeah.
So I don't know how that is going to impact things. I mean, like we kind of talked a little bit about it, not directly, but kind of indirectly last time, of like clearly our experience of what we are watching in a show is heavily influenced by what we are bringing to the table.
Yeah.
Like your connection with Zuko, all those pieces, like there is a lot there that determines whether we like or dislike something.
Yeah, exactly.
I do, though, think that there are, regardless of whether you've seen the Nick show or not, there are probably some objective challenges.
Yes.
With this show.
Let's start with something that I think is emblematic. It's a small example.
Yep.
But I think it's emblematic of the larger problem.
Okay, let's see it.
It's beautiful.
It is.
Looks
phenomenal.
Visually stunning.
Yeah.
I like the Southern Air Temple. Feels almost cooler than in the anime.
I could agree with that.
So if you talk about compliment sandwich, there you go.
Yeah.
Compliment.
And there is something nice to see about like the vibrant, real, like having this full of people is a cool visual.
Exactly. Why is he flying?
That's a really good question.
Let's talk about making changes to an IP.
Yep.
Why was this change made?
So here's the thing. I don't know if this is necessarily a change.
Certainly wasn't doing it a lot before.
No, but this is where I think there might be I don't know if this is going to be like a misunderstanding of the original work or something like that. Here's what I feel like. This is the show trying to show you that Aang is a show-off and talented. It's tough because we don't really get any context for, is this different than other airbenders can do? Like, we just kind of see everybody watching and saying, oh, wow, but we don't really get it.
Yes.
The other challenge with this is that the lack of understanding piece is that what he's doing here, essentially flying, is actually covered in the series after Aang's Avatar in The Legend of Korra, where it's an entire arc where one of the villains is an airbender and has to like go through tons of spiritual practice and then lose somebody that he loves to actually have the ability to fly. So the fact that it looks, even if he's not technically flying here, the fact that it looks as close to flying as it does is a little bit of a problem, I think.
Yeah. What you've pointed out is notable and important, but that's actually not the problem that I have with it.
What do you see?
So the problem that I have with it is that this was a decision that was made, like I said before, style over substance. I can understand somebody being like, we need to give Aang this interesting opening moment where we show his abilities as an airbender, where he's kind of this prodigy, where he's also carefree and fun. Like, I get the reasoning for that. But the question on the flip side is like, when you make a decision like that to give a character an ability, what ramifications does it have further on down the line? So the question that I have now is, if Aang can fly, what's the purpose of Appa? So
what's the purpose of his glider?
Yeah, exactly. But even then, the times when he tried to like fly around the world with his glider, it never went well. You got the impression that like that was a limitation.
Yeah.
The problem that I have is that you've given him a moment here at the expense of the physical purpose of another character. It's like Appa served a story reason for getting characters from point A to point B, and now every time he's going to use Appa to fly anywhere, it's like, why? In the back of my head, there's this like, but why isn't he just flying there? And like, you might think that's a little bit nitpicky, but it's like, if there's something that's pulling you out of the story, that's your job as a filmmaker to smooth out that friction. We talked before about like friction as an audience member. Like, it's not a good thing. You want no friction in your viewing experience, and you want it to all be in the story purpose and like figuring out things and not like, well, this doesn't make like, it's not piecing it together. It's like, I'm trying to do your job for you to make everything fit together.
I have a suspicion that this is not going to be the last time that we talk about for this show. Taking something away from a character.
Yes.
By accident because you've done something else to another character.
Or intentionally.
Maybe. So in the spirit of constructive criticism.
Yes.
Are there any changes that you would make to how this is done? I have an idea.
Yeah.
I would have loved to have seen this introduction that would communicate kind of the same idea of Aang is carefree and a really talented airbender by using an in-universe scenario that could also be really good in maybe another challenge that this show has, which is building relationships.
Yes.
So I would have loved to have seen him with a whole bunch of other air nomad kids dominating them in airball.
Yes.
Right? Like
exactly.
Here, he's talented, he's also having fun and really goofy, and he has relationship with these other people in his universe. So that would have been my suggestion if I was in the writer's room of like, maybe we could try this instead.
Yeah.
Aang, you have always been special. The most talented airbender I have ever known.
I never asked to be special.
But you are. You are the Avatar.
What's your impressions of this scene?
Again, it's like, it's not bad. There's elements of it that I like.
Yeah.
I like the fact that I like the fact that Gyatso has what feels like a personal reason for bringing Aang here. I like that part of what it does is it serves the purpose of introducing the audience right now to the other avatars who are also going to be introduced later in the show. Like, there's some good stuff there. The biggest challenge that I see here is I don't believe Aang's response.
Yeah.
It could have been okay with very few changes, but it's that first, I never asked to be special, that
you brought that up.
I don't believe.
And why don't you believe it?
Because fundamentally, as a therapist, what I know is that all of us want to be special. But what we don't want is to be separated from other people by that specialness. In the show,
Yeah.
part of what happens is when Aang is going through this process of realizing that he's the Avatar, the justification that the Nickelodeon show gives you is that you see Aang trying to interact with his peers, and he experiences the fact that he's the Avatar distancing him from everybody else,
Yeah.
that they're going to take him away from Gyatso,
Yeah.
and that motivates his response.
Yes.
So the "I never asked to be special" here feels like an unmotivated response, and that's
also,
why I don't believe it.
And it also feels weird that it came right after this show-offy "look at me" moment.
Yeah,
Diving around, it's
Yeah.
just like it's like I don't want to be special. You were just doing a lot of special stuff. You
Yeah.
seem pretty darn happy about it.
Yeah.
It doesn't fit. It doesn't jive.
yeah, being special has never been a problem for you before.
Yeah.
And Gyatso has not yet told you that you're the Avatar.
Yeah.
So that doesn't make sense. It is like what we have just seen set up and established in the world doesn't provide a context where this makes sense.
Yeah.
The world needs you, Aang. You're to leave right away so you can begin training in the other disciplines.
Why do I have to be different? Can't I just keep pretending I'm your friend?
You are my friend. You will always be my friend.
I also don't understand, why is this sad? Because from the context of looking forwards, it's like you've got to go and you got to train in all the other elements so that you can be the Avatar and take on this responsibility.
Yeah.
It's like throughout the entirety of the show, you're going to do that with a bunch of friends.
Yeah.
And have fun with people. I understand about the idea of like, hey, like I'm going to be away from you for a bit and like we're not going to be able to hang out every day. The line of, can I still pretend to be your friend?
Yeah.
It's like I don't understand where that's coming from. Nothing about their relationship is changing apart from the amount of time that they're going to be spending together.
Yeah.
And maybe there's a big difference that's going to take place. Like maybe there is a big relational difference that's going to take place now that he's the Avatar and I'm going to have to treat you differently. But I'm not seeing any reason to feel that right now.
Well, and that's, I think, where one of the big challenges with the live action adaptation is that what it does is it takes moments from the Nickelodeon show
Yeah.
and it brings them into this narrative, but it leaves all of the context and feeling behind.
Yes.
So like in the show, part of the reason why Aang does not want to be the Avatar is because the Air Nomad, let's say, leadership is actually going to separate out Gyatso from
Yes.
Aang, right? I don't remember actually if we get a piece of that where in this show, I think the only thing that we see in the live action show, if I'm remembering correctly, is that they just say, no, you need to tell Aang that he's the Avatar now.
Yeah.
They don't say, you're not allowed to train him anymore.
Yeah.
Which is the huge crux for why it is such a sad discovery
Yeah.
in the original show.
But even if they were to show that in that scene, if Aang doesn't know it, why would he be sad?
Exactly.
That's the crux of
Yeah,
it.
and Aang does know it. He does overhear it in the original show. He
Yeah.
doesn't know that here.
Yeah. There's a term for this in writing called dramatic irony. It's like when you as an audience member know something that the characters in the show
Yeah.
don't know.
Yeah.
So like, for example, like let's say that we know as an audience that like the relationship between Aang and Monk Gyatso is going to be really different, but Aang doesn't know anything about
he's
that.
excited.
Yeah, he's excited. We're upset. That's dramatic irony.
Yeah.
It's the classic example is monsters hiding behind the door. We know it's there, but the character who's going to go open the door is like, oh, you're going to get that jump scare. Like
Yeah.
they don't know what's happening, but we do. And that difference creates tension. Let's say it's a rom-com and you know that like, oh, this person likes this person. Oh, but like this person actually likes this. And there's this love triangle, but they don't know this, but we've got this. Like it creates interest because you know that there's things happening that these characters are going to have to deal with, but that's not present here. And it's sort of, it's this weird kind of mishmash of like, they're expecting us to feel a certain way because it's almost like we have a pre-existing knowledge with this story, writing it as if people already have the knowledge of everything that's going to be happening, not just in this scene, but also later down the line.
But it doesn't work that way.
No.
Because then for new people who are coming into the show, they won't have that understanding. And even for us who have watched the original show, it's not like those feelings automatically transfer over.
Yeah.
You still have to provide and motivate these characters to get us to feel a certain way.
Exactly. Yeah.
So maybe in the spirit again of construction, if you were going to restructure this differently, I could imagine it being, imagine this, if we're going to say, we're going to be real loose with the original, let's say Aang is announced to the entire Air Nomad tribe as he is the Avatar. They do it early because the Fire Nation War is happening, so you got to get going with this.
Yeah.
Even if you just get a real brief moment of like, all these people who used to be buddy-buddy with Aang are now like, oh yes, great Avatar.
Yeah.
And like, even their reverence for him, which is fine, but it still feels like separation. And you see Aang being like, oh, that's not good.
Yeah.
Like, see him alone in his room, something, whatever. And then even if he's maybe alone in his room, sneaks out, overhears, if we reverse it, and then the scene of Gyatso and the Air Nomad leaders is after that.
Yeah.
And now it's, Gyatso, you're too close to him. The Avatar is going to need to train with someone else.
Yeah.
He overhears that. It kind of will harken back to the same idea as the original.
Yeah.
Where now you actually motivate Aang to be like, I don't want to be the Avatar.
Exactly. A good thing turned into a bad thing can sometimes be more impactful than just a bad thing on itself.
Exactly.
So I think like there's tons of changes that they could make in that respect to make it more cohesive, more interesting. And I think like everything that you're getting at is show the change, show the motivation. Right now we've had him being told all this information and he's saying like, well, I don't want this. Or like, he's almost like explaining how he's feeling. That's going to come up a lot in this show of like, this is how I'm feeling.
Yep.
And
should we go right to the next, how this is how I'm feeling? Because it happens right after this.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it.
See, pause for a second. Even something like that, you have the opportunity where if you had like everybody else sleeping on one side of the room, Aang sleeping on the other. Oh. Or overhead shot cut out with no roof, everybody else in one communal space, Aang on his own in the Avatar's room or whatever it is. Like anything to visualize separation, and you don't even have to change scene order. Like there's an opportunity in that 5 to 6 seconds that we just saw where you could have communicated to us Aang is feeling separated from his community.
Corridor Digital did this. John Wick did this. Those are action oriented.
Yeah, the
like,
top downs. Yeah,
but like you transition from like the top down perspective from one room to another, and there's this clear divide, a wall separating them that just further emphasizes this idea of like you are set apart in a way could be cool, but this is a really bad connotation of it.
And so maybe that is one of the big criticisms, if we're going to be specific about criticisms in this show, is the lack of the use of visual language.
Yes. In the top
Sozin's comment.
Yeah, if we're gonna flip it now, that's a cool addition.
Yeah.
I really like the idea that there's this impending doom at the same time that Aang's realization that he is the Avatar. That's a great example of like something that takes so little effort and so little time. That's not a crazy VFX job to be like tiny little comet in the sky just coming down, just like a little thing in the back of your head. It's a small addition, but it makes a big change.
Well, I think maybe that's where some real skilled writing and filmmaking can take place, is when you use very small things to do a lot of heavy lifting in your story.
Yeah, efficient storytelling.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Efficient storytelling is using the small things to make a big impact.
Maybe on the line of efficiency, I'll also say something in defense of the live action remake. I've noticed after watching this, it's harder to keep fast paced in live action.
Yeah.
When you're doing animation at like 12 frames a second, like you can have like very rapid, fast things. A character going from this point to this point can happen way faster and it not feel weird.
Yeah.
But in live action, you have to, because it is set in real life, things like continuity, things like motion, you can't have this like stretch and squash kind of crazy, like whipping from one place to the other. It's like you're limited and you're bound by the physical space around you. And so just one of the consequences is that things take longer to do. A conversation walking around, like it will take longer. And it's a lot more of a difficult process to edit that in a way that's really fast, while also keeping the pacing feeling correct.
That makes sense.
So in defense of this, it's like, it's hard. You have to cut out a little bit. And maybe that's one of the reasons that they're kind of like condensing everything to like tell, don't show, because like we got to get through everything and we don't have the luxury of doing things as fast.
Yeah.
But that's where these little decisions that make a bigger impact, they mean so much more. And they're so much more important.
Exactly.
Gyatso says I'm supposed to be the Avatar. Monks don't even trust me to feed the baby bison, and I'm supposed to save the world? He said I need to remember who I am. But I know who I am. I like to play airball and eat banana cakes and goof off with my friends. That's who I am. Not someone who can stop the Fire Nation. The other kids always say I'm lucky because of the things I could do. But I'd trade places with any of them. I don't want to leave. I don't want the responsibility. I'm scared of my power. I'm scared of being alone.
Tell, don't show.
You know what's funny? This doesn't feel as egregious the second time that I watched it.
No.
There are some maybe more egregious ones that we'll get to probably in a little bit.
Yeah.
But that wasn't as terrible as I remember on the first one. Although, this is one of, like, when I first watched it, that was one of maybe 3 or 4 moments in the show where I actually, while watching it, I had to pause, physically cringe, and take a lap before. And that's what I mean. Like, I had to work hard because, like, okay, just get through it. Just push. Because it, like, yeah. All of the things that he has said there. I know who I am. I like to eat banana cakes and I like to play airball with my friends. Like,
did you see me holding up fingers?
Yeah.
I was literally counting the times, like, things that happened off screen that you should have showed us in a scene.
Yeah. It's like all, and maybe that's another big criticism for the show, is that all of the cool things seem to take place off of screen.
Yeah.
And when I say cool, I mean like the things that would actually make Aang feel like a real character. And even they could have been done in a way where if you're going to have these things included, you don't need to change huge amounts of the scene. Like you do the airball scene instead of him flying around at the beginning. When he's walking with Gyatso, have him eating a banana cake. Like literally
it's such a simple
anything.
Change. Yeah. I wonder if I should like try to quote unquote like fix Avatar: The Last Airbender by like VFX, like adding in like a banana cake.
You add in a banana cake?
Just a roto puppet his arm just like eating a banana cake. That
would actually
see if it
be
would
really
actually
funny.
make more sense.
That's really funny.
Yeah.
So question for you about this. This is a little bit of a mean comment. When you're watching parts like this, and there will be more that we'll talk about, but when you watch parts of the show that are like this, does it feel more like the original Nick Avatar? Or does it feel more like the play of Avatar at the Ember Island Players that recaps the entire show?
I am so glad that you brought that up.
Because there's moments that feel very much like this is Ember Island Players unironically.
Well, you say that, but like you made the comment before that I was like, I'm going to get into that. There's all of this tell don't show to me feels a lot like a theater production.
Yeah.
This doesn't feel like Avatar: The Last Airbender, the Netflix live action series where we're going to see all this cool. It feels like a theater production. It's like, I am Aang. I feel this way. To say that it feels like a theater production, that's not a bad thing. That's not a dig on it, because theater productions can be amazing.
Yeah.
But theater productions have this constraint where you need to be able to express this emotion, and for the person in the 70 millionth row in the back to be able to understand what's going on.
Yeah.
Like you have an entire audience and you're constrained by the people in the front row. They have a good vision and a good ability to see, but everybody in the back, everybody on the sides, everybody needs to be able to see, hear, and understand what's happening in a cohesive way. And so you need to do things in a different way.
Well, the aspects of theater are constrained by the context that medium takes place in.
Yeah, exactly. It feels to me like this is a terrible context for it to feel like a theater production, because it's like you have like a 100 millimeter lens that you can get really close in and really get this interesting facial expression to tell us visually that
There's
this is
so
what this
many
character
other
feels.
tools that you could be using.
Yes, exactly. And so this feels like when you're utilizing that sort of a technique in order to convey emotion, that's why I said it feels lazy. Because, and I want to also make this clear, I'm not digging on the actor who plays Aang, because especially like I think the problem is not with the acting, it's with the writing.
I'm glad you said that, because I tend to agree. And
100%.
I was debating, because I was talking about this with some people the other day, of like, what percentage of the quality of a piece of film is the responsibility of an actor directly?
That's a great question.
Because if you give them a script like this, like you give the actor who plays Aang these lines, I do feel like there is a ceiling that he has for how much he can pull out of that scene.
Yes. So I think there's two questions. So the first piece is, I think what you're getting at, when you're given maybe, let's call it a rough script.
Yeah.
Like not rough as in like rushed, rough.
But like
maybe it was rushed.
a pretty difficult script to work with.
Rough as in, I don't necessarily know if this is the best decision to be going with, but whatever. It's tough. I have a soft spot in my heart because the actor is the one who we're going to be like visually, their face is what we're going to be associating with the good or bad outcome of that performance.
It's like because of the actor, they're almost held responsible just because they're the face of the product.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think necessarily I would say I hold them responsible to make a good representation out of that script that they're given. What I would say though is that the older and more established that an actor is, the more responsibility they have, not to make it a better performance, but to talk with the writers and directors about what may or may not be working. And that's where especially I think that Aang, he probably did an amazing job as is, and I hold him 0% responsible to have those conversations with the writers and directors about like, this doesn't feel like it's working, this needs to change.
Like, how could a 14 or 15-year-old kid be responsible for
that? But like, even you take examples like Mark Hamill in The Last Jedi, he had so many concerns and problems that he brought up to Rian Johnson about, I don't like the way that Luke is being portrayed here. I think this is totally different than how he would actually act. And it seemed like even Mark Hamill, and one of the biggest blockbusters, who's synonymous with this role, we think of him as Luke Skywalker.
A guy who has not just been in the original Star Wars, but he's kind of continued on in different pieces of the medium. To keep connected with the Star Wars universe. He stayed invested with the character.
And not just within the Star Wars universe, he's an industry legend.
Yeah.
Like, he's a name. And even he wasn't able to be like we're not doing this. So like, as an actor, there is a certain amount of responsibility that I think you have to portray things, but there is a limit to what you're given. And I don't necessarily hold an actor responsible if they're given a poor script to begin with.
It's like the actor is responsible for pulling the most out of what they're given.
Yeah.
But they cannot be held responsible for creating something out of thin air.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is why when we're talking about this one, I almost want to hold off on criticizing any of the acting at all.
I don't think the acting was at all a problem.
Yeah. And even if they're like, it was stiff here and it was there, it's like, well, were we really given a fair, were the actors given a fair shake for us to be able to assess them objectively?
Exactly.
You're right. Just needs to go over things always make more sense. At least for now. You can't!
Oh, yeah, gosh. How the scene ends.
Yeah, we should probably touch on that.
This is a prime example of a I don't know why they even changed this. It's like Aang went from, in the Nickelodeon version, from running away, like I'm going to run away and not be the Avatar, to I'm just going to clear my head. I'm just gonna, like, you know what? I just need to walk. I just need to take a breath. I just need to dip out for like a second. I'll be back.
And then I need to
clear my head.
Yeah, and then I do come back.
Yeah,
I am starting to go back.
Yeah, and everybody's pissed at me for leaving.
Yeah.
It's like a complete reversal. In the Nickelodeon version, it was like, I feel so guilty because I left, and everybody else around him was like, no, it's okay.
How could you have known?
You're just a kid.
Yeah.
And in this one, it's just like, I just went out to like grab a snack.
Yeah.
And now King Boomy is like, why did you leave?
Yeah.
It's like, I don't understand.
It feels totally, when they make this change, it feels like it does two things that are really problematic.
Yeah.
One is that it totally undercuts every other character change they make for anybody who interacts with Aang, who criticizes him.
Yes.
Like, if you had held to the original storyline for what Aang does here, then those changes make sense.
Yes.
But the fact that you've made this change totally invalidates those future changes. Boomy has no right to be upset with Aang because he would have, if he hadn't stepped out, he would have died, right? So, and then anybody else who's criticizing him is like, the Avatar has got, and to be fair, it's like in the show, if anybody's in the original show on Nick, if anybody's going to criticize the Avatar, it makes sense, because even if we would say, how could you have known or whatever, we are following Aang's story and we know what he knows, which is that he ran away. And so he does feel responsible.
Yeah.
So
Which goes into that narrative dissonance.
Yeah.
Because like maybe, so all the other, we know and Aang knows, but a lot of the other characters around don't know that he actually ran away.
Yeah.
And so there is that disconnect where it's like, if you actually knew, maybe you would be a little, and there's that tension.
where you could get maybe the other characters like Sokka and Katara to defend him, but then we're all sitting back with Aang being like, yeah, but we know you deserve this criticism.
Yeah.
Versus this scene doesn't just undercut the other changes they make to other characters like Boomy. It also totally destroys Aang's character arc.
Yep.
Because his entire purpose, or like the foundational character arc for Aang in the original show, is kind of aligned with his airbender ways. He's avoiding problems, stepping back, and especially he's avoiding responsibility. And it is that avoiding responsibility that creates this first problem initially, right? Like, who knows what would have happened in the original if maybe he had stayed, maybe the airbenders could have gotten him out before he was attacked, maybe he would have left before, had gone to a different nation before the Fire Nation attacked, who knows? But because he ran away, the world was without the Avatar for 100 years, and now everybody has had to suffer. And his entire journey is going from a, let's say, cowardly kid to somebody who's going to step into not just his power, but also his responsibility to take care of other people instead of running away.
Yeah.
When you do this, it's like, oh, Aang's not a coward. So what's his character arc?
Yeah.
We don't know. And it becomes, I think, another way I would tend to describe the show is that everybody's character arcs really seem to be flattened. For Aang, for Katara, for Sokka, the only person who maybe survived was Zuko.
Yep.
But everybody else has been like, oh, I see your lovely character arc. Let's just flatten that to nothing.
Yeah.
And then make you feel like a nothing character, because without that arc, we have nothing to grab onto with these characters.
Yeah. You talked about criticism. We should be really, really specific about it. It should be productive.
Yep.
Why do you think they squashed all of these character arcs? Because I feel like you're right. We've seen so many character arcs get diminished and get reduced to a two-dimensional, one-dimensional version of a character who doesn't really change over time that much.
Yeah.
And I think it's probably important to figure out not just did it happen or not, but if something negative did happen, probably why did it happen, and then how can you fix it?
Yeah, let's take a look.
Gotta admit, he has a way with people. He knows how to connect. To get through to people.
I'm sorry.
That's his real power. Connection. Building bridges. That's how he's gonna be the Avatar.
So tell me that this is not essentially just like, listen, the Avatar is the master of all four elements, but the real power of the Avatar is friendship bending.
That's exactly what it is.
It's like, this was a scene, again, where I had to stop and take a breath, because this one felt like being hit in the face with a frying pan. It was like as on the nose as you could possibly get about a theme where, honestly, and this is the other challenge with the show, is that, okay, so he's going to help people build relationships. Where in the show does he now help people by building relationships? Like, there's nothing that I see with him when he goes to Omashu. I don't see it. When he goes to the Northern Water Tribe, I don't see it, right? Like, where is his ability to connect with people that makes things better and different?
Yeah. This is totally the way it is. Trust me, bro.
Yeah.
Man, that's his real ability. The ability to connect. I forgot how harsh that line hit me to begin with, as he's like running around playing with the other kids. Like, this is not the example that you use. This kind of like narration of what's happening, like these two things don't feel like they match. It doesn't work.
Yeah.
And this is the job. And this is where I say it's like, if maybe something that feels or comes across as bad acting is not actually bad acting. It's bad editing.
Yeah.
It's bad directing. It's definitely bad directing because like you should have been able to look at this and see it's like, this is not going to hit home very well.
Yeah.
I've said this, maybe I've said this before. I know I've said this to you. I don't remember if I've said this on the podcast, is that a director needs to be able to have an element of having touched every different department in filmmaking. Like they don't need to be a VFX artist. They don't need to be a costume designer. They don't need to be a writer, but dang, do they need to have touched all of these different departments so that they can have an understanding of like, where do things like fit in? And the most important one in my perspective is they need to have touched the editing timeline.
Yeah.
They need to at least have been in the room with the editors as they're going along. And like, if they could have been an editor themselves and like actually stitch stuff together, because you know that sometimes you put stuff together and in your brain it feels so good. You're like, yeah. And then you put it together on the timeline. I was like, this is terrible. It's exactly what I filmed. It's exactly what I had in my brain. And it doesn't work.
Yeah, it doesn't make me feel the way that I was hoping what I was thinking would make me feel.
It's not working. And if it doesn't work, then you need to find a creative solution around this. Like, I don't know, like even like a little montage of like them going around and then like it's a voiceover of Katara like saying this instead of her like sitting there watching him being like, that's Aang. If it doesn't work, you change it. If it doesn't work, you find creative solutions around it. I bet they had so much footage of just like stuff happening.
Yeah.
It's like
Could have been spliced in.
Yeah, you could figure out a way around. I don't know.
I didn't actually think we were going to talk about her first, but like in part of that monologue piece, the one thing that they could have done that would have actually started to give us a glimmer of Katara being Katara would have been for her to make some sort of reference to hope. Because like Katara is the hope character. That is what she does. That is her purpose in the show. She's the one who sees Aang and says, I have hope now for the world. I'm going to help deliver Aang to everybody else because I want everybody else to have the hope that I have. And that would have been a beautiful moment to be like, is it really about connecting with people or is it about giving them hope in a dark time? And like, hey, look at all these kids. They're in a really tough spot because there's a war going on right now and they have this warrior village where they got to be prepared for stuff. But now they've maybe got a little bit of hope. That would have been so great for Katara to deliver something on that.
Well, that makes me wonder about how much was this a change of the central theme of what they were trying to go for in the series versus them just not really understanding that that was a big piece of it to begin with.
Yeah.
Like, I actually don't know if they sat down in the writer's room and was like, we know that Katara's big thing was hope before, but we're actually going to switch that out with something like connection. I don't think that happened. I think it kind of feels like they just didn't have a mission statement for what they wanted this show to have. Like what is the purpose?
Yeah,
And
or
maybe,
a mission statement for each individual character to have.
well, even on the larger face of it, everything that we've been talking about with regards to like the changes that they're making here, the question that I have is like, why did you make this? Like, you have a multi-$100 million budget from Netflix to make a great live action.
Yeah.
But what are you making? Like, you're making Avatar: The Last Airbender. You could have made anything, but you're making this.
Yeah.
Why are you making this?
Yeah.
And if you're going to make this for hundreds of millions of dollars, why are you making it?
Yeah.
Because the question that I have is, if you can't answer that question of like, why are we bringing this into the world? Why are we spending this much time, energy, money in order to make this? The only thing that I'm left with is money.
Yeah, it's unfortunate because I feel like if I had an answer, that's really the only one that I have is the unfortunate nature of our entertainment industry now really kind of actually being the outworkings of a venture capital system.
Yeah.
Why is it Avatar that's being remade? Because Avatar has a really loyal fan base. It has brand recognition. It is, if you're going to dump hundreds of millions of dollars in anything, it is a safe bet, right?
Yeah.
So, and that's, I think, the challenge, that when it is, okay, this is safe, what do you do with that?
Yeah. I think the big problem that I have, and the reason why maybe it's hitting me a little bit rough, I said it feels like they took something that I love and sort of just like, they kind of ruined it a little bit. I think the reason that I'm left with that feeling is because when I look at interviews with the actors, they're stoked on this. And they're like, I am so excited to play Aang, Katara, Sokka, Zuko. Like, this is so cool. Like, I'm looking forward to this. I've always loved it. Like this. And I don't get that feeling from the way that it was produced, directed, and written. So it feels like the people who are front and center, the actors, they're all on board. Like, we're going to make this the best Avatar. And it feels like the producers, directors, and writers are like, this is going to make us a lot of money.
Yeah.
And like, that was their driving force. So that's the feeling that I'm left with. I don't know people's hearts. I don't know their intentions.
Yeah.
But all I know is that that's the feeling that I'm left with. It feels, unfortunately, like the only reason they made this was for a cash grab.
It feels hollow.
Yeah.
And it's moments like this.
It doesn't just feel hollow. It feels like they hollowed out something that I love.
Yeah, I think that's an appropriate way to put it.
Yeah.
Can we look at our favorite couple in the show?
Let's do it.
Sokka and Suki.
Us Southern Water Tribe warriors are known more for our hand-to-hand fighting anyway. Oh, right now? Okay.
So, I love Sokka in the original. I love Suki in the original. This scene does neither of them any favors.
No.
What this is supposed to be is or the essence, let's say, of the original show is that this is an opportunity for Sokka to be humbled by the reality of coming into the big world, not just his little village. And it's an opportunity for us to see how capable in somebody like Suki non-benders can be. What we get instead with the way that this scene is constructed is we get a very insecure Water Tribe boy who's trying to be a warrior getting absolutely bullied by somebody way better than him.
I was about to say, she feels like a bully.
Which is weird when she's also kind of horny for him. Right? Like that original scene. So, and this is a huge problem. To get into the specifics, it's challenging because one of the big things that people were talking about, a big talking point before this came out, the problem here is that in the original, Sokka tends to have a pretty, let's call it a belittling view of females and what they're capable of.
Oh, would you call him sexist?
No, I want to call him belittling.
Okay.
Because I kind of want to avoid, because I want to get, again, I want to get specific. I don't want to get caught up into labels, right? Yeah. There's a piece when I look at Sokka and what he does in the original is that he has this, we'll call it, if we harken back to other things we talked about before, he has this persona and mask of a warrior.
Yes.
It is one that, let's say, is shoes that are a little bit too big for him to fill right now, because it doesn't show it in this series, which is also kind of another detractor, but in the original show, every other adult male or male his age goes to war. He's the only male above the age of like 7 left in his tribe. And so he's got this, I have to be the man of the tribe. And so he's kind of forced into taking this role. But as a byproduct of that, he starts to be kind of, I would imagine, because he's pretty insecure and not feeling like a warrior, he's like, I have to pretend that I am. So if I can't match that, let me push everybody else around me down to be like, the ladies or whatever, because I'm here to protect them, because he's got to have some distance between him and the other people. But when he's now going into the big world and he's got this persona mask of warrior, he now meets a woman in Suki who absolutely shatters his mask. Not him as a person, but his illusion that he is this amazing warrior. And in the show, he challenges her, he attacks her first, and he gets absolutely put on his butt.
Yeah.
And the value of that is that he is trying to do something and realizes he is not capable, and it becomes very humbling. And it's this wonderful character growth opportunity for him to say, the way that I was looking at the world, at people, and at myself was wrong. And I can't keep looking at it this way because it's so in my face how wrong I was. I have to now do a reconciliation. But that reconciliation requires a very cool moment of humility for him.
Yes.
Where he has to go to the female warrior and not in the words that he says, but in the tone and what he kind of insinuates by this. I'm not as good as you. I need your help in order to become better. And it's a phenomenal, it's the cool thing because in every character interaction, there's the character that's kind of driving, but then there's also the impact on the other character. So by the way that Sokka is here, it puts Suki in such a great light in the original because she's not only capable, but she's also like forgiving
and patient.
Yeah. To deal with somebody like Sokka, immensely patient.
Yeah.
Right. And then kind of as a byproduct, it's this kind of nice little meet cute. She also kind of has a crush on him.
Yeah.
Very sweet.
I
right?
loved that line. Sokka's like, I thought you were a warrior. And she's like, I am a warrior. I'm also a woman.
Yeah.
And it's like, you can be both.
Yeah. So. And she's great at like, even in that moment, in a more positive way than before, than like putting Sokka on his ass in that way.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm also going to kind of break your worldview a little bit by saying you don't have to fit into one of these boxes.
I did it overtly and like put you on your ass before. And now I'm just going to like, just a little bit more.
Like I have both of these characteristics.
Yes.
Don't stick me in one box.
Yeah.
I can be both.
That's interesting because I shattered your worldview in one direction, and now you push too far to the other side. Now we're gonna course correct a little bit again.
Yeah.
It's this great little like orienting of like you see Suki's interaction is telling us about her character and how she views herself, but she's also orienting Sokka at the same time.
Yep.
Which is so lovely to see.
It feels like it's one of those examples that leads to such great characters in the show, in the original show. Because they are multifaceted.
Yeah.
They have layers and they have dimensions that all go together.
Yeah.
The way that this scene is then structured is Sokka does not have any of that belittling towards his female counterparts that we have. Mm-hmm. So the challenge with that is that if the writers wanted to remove that from the show, fine. But you then need to have something else that motivates his character in this moment to justify the scene. And I think, again, it's a challenge or a criticism of the show. You can't just copy and paste scenes from the original into the new version if they're not carrying some sort of motivation.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they're going to feel hollow or they're going to give the wrong sense. So, like, one of the most difficult things to see is that however they chose to direct this, like she attacks him while he's still stretching.
But not just that, she attacks him first. Like she's the initiator.
Yeah.
She's the combatant. If you're going to humble somebody, it doesn't really feel that way if they're kind of caught off guard by it.
This feels like, I mean, to go into a jiu-jitsu reference for you, like this feels like a black belt dragging a white belt onto the mat and then breaking their arm.
Yeah.
It's like, you're not cool. You're a jerk.
Yeah.
And it, again, for me, I feel so bad for the actress because when you pair that also with the fact that she was like kind of gawking at him half naked before, it makes her look like such a weirdo.
Like a creep almost.
Yeah, like I'm going to creep on you and then I'm going to beat you up.
Like childhood schoolyard crush where I'm going to punch you because I like you, but I don't know how to express the way that I feel. It's like, it comes across as childish, I guess is the way that.
It feels so antithetical, especially to the role that Suki played, even though it's a little bit more minor in the Avatar team of the kind of core main cast, where she really feels like one of the more mature, put together characters.
Yeah, actually,
of anybody else,
she's the most put together.
Like even more than
Katara.
She has responsibility. She's taking the group of people with the pregnant lady through the Serpent's Pass. Like she is stepping up to responsibility. She is the most mature out of anybody.
Yeah.
And then this scene almost makes it seem like she is the least mature, the least socially aware of any of the kids in the show. It's the challenge, right? Of like, if you're going to remove Sokka's sexism from this component of the show, you need to first look at what is the impact on the female characters around them.
Yeah.
Because by removing that, you totally destroyed like the value of having these powerful female characters in the role. You took their essence away and you actually make them look bad.
Yep. in a weird way, it's like you tried to remove Sokka's sexism, maybe for political reasons, and the end result is that you created something where I actually don't like any of the female characters. You make them all kind of look mean and horrible.
Who are, to go back to your hollowing out thing, originally phenomenal female characters. Some of the best.
Yeah.
Like, and it's that, like you said earlier, you start with on a silver platter.
Yeah.
You are handed some of the best characters that have existed in the medium of animation and television for the last 20 something years.
Yeah.
Like up in the top of what you would say is beloved characters that we connect with, that are purposeful. And it's just like, you take a corkscrew, you stick it in their heart, and you pull the heart out. And it's like, great, what do we got left?
Maybe let me offer one specific thing.
Perfect.
That you could do differently here. Jackie Chan kind of popularized and made it really apparent this idea that if you take cheap shots and put somebody in an underdog position, we root for them.
Yeah.
And in this scene, unless you want us to root for Sokka, don't make him the underdog.
Yep.
Don't make him the person who's not the aggressor, the person who's caught off guard, the person who's approached in the woods when he's on his own, who's like Suki beckons him to fight. She's like, come on, bring it at me. It's like, he didn't want any of this. So we feel bad for him.
Yeah.
And so the end result, unfortunately, is that like, it feels like instead of Sokka being humbling, Suki just ends up placating to his insecurities.
Yeah. So if maybe for this scene, just flip the roles. It's maybe Suki and the other Kyoshi warriors who are doing their target practice.
Yeah.
Sokka's the one who comes up to them.
Yeah.
Let's continue to like eliminate the sexism. Don't bring it in. Just have him come in saying like, I'm the best warrior in my village.
Yeah.
And just have it be, I have the facade of being the best warrior. And like, they'll be like, oh, well, why don't you take a shot at the woman? And he does that one. Maybe even have like, I feel like you could treat Suki so well here by having her be really casual about everything. Have her like kind of adjusting her headdress and being like, oh, you did that? Oh, cool. And then like flips, does it all.
Yeah.
And then move somehow to the hand-to-hand combat and have her being like, if they had maybe like a younger Kyoshi warrior, where they could have been like, so you get to go against our white belt.
Yeah.
And he's like, no, I'll take you on. She's like, are you sure about that? He's like, yeah, I'm sure. Okay, I warned you. And then very casually dismantles him.
Yeah,
right?
It kind of beckons up this idea of, you know about it, but the Gracie challenge, where it's for those of you who don't know, in early Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, when sort of Gracie Jiu-Jitsu was making its first sort of landmark entry into North America, people would come in and challenge you to like a fight.
Walk into their dojo and be like, I want to fight. I think you guys suck. I can beat you.
And the reason that this is a thing is because the instructors, it was like called the Gracie Challenge because they welcomed this. They're like, if you think that you could beat a jiu-jitsu practitioner, it's like, come on in. Like, we'll gladly accept the challenge. Yep. So there's some great old footage of like people coming in to challenge who are like throwing fists and it's like, going crazy. And all they do is like take them down, hold them down. They have this thing of like open, like palm slaps rather than like punching them. Because like it's restraint. It's this idea of like, I am obviously the more seasoned fighter, the person who knows more.
Yeah.
And the reason I think that's a good thing to bring up and a good parallel is because it shows you, how do you gracefully win against an unskilled challenger? You need to have the unskilled challenger, the person who initiates the combat.
Yeah, they have to initiate.
And you need to have the person who, and there's a couple times where it's like, there's like, hey, go up against this blue belt. Go up against this person who's not even in like the upper half ranking of our system.
Yeah, like pick a student. I think they're probably good enough to beat you,
and
right?
you still end up getting whooped because it shows then that like if you can't even beat this person, it's like then this entire system, I guess in jiu-jitsu, it's like it's the sport of jiu-jitsu is what's, being shown for how great it is. But in the context of a show like Avatar, it's like it's the ideologies that character holds then is taking the place of that martial art then.
Yeah.
It's like, no, Suki's way of viewing the world is actually better if she's the one who wins this fight. And that's sort of represented in what happens. Yeah. So yeah, I think, man, you could go on and on about like, it's just a catastrophic example of you make a couple little changes here and there and here and that, and everything just falls apart. Because because you don't have like a central motivation for going through it. Like you said it before. It's like you just copied and pasted a scene into a new spot, and everything that was undergirding that, the foundation is all gone, and so it just all crumbles.
It does make it feel like without that core motivation, anything that you're creating is on this like really precarious
Yeah.
point. And any little thing going wrong, not done perfectly, when you don't have that underlying motivation and thematic reasoning for something, it feels like if you're not perfect, you're going to absolutely fail.
Well, I think that gets into a really interesting reason why a lot of live action adaptations fail, because I feel like it puts you in this precarious position where it's like you have this template for something that was done like successfully before
Hopefully
you.
successfully.
And so all you
Yeah.
need to do is replicate that. But then you're put in a scenario where you're almost lulled into a state where you're not asking, why are we doing this?
Yeah.
Why does this matter?
It's just this happens, this happens, this happens.
Because we've ragged so much on like the producer, director, writer positions within this framework here. So I'll maybe step back a little bit and say, I can understand when you're rewriting an already existing piece of media, how sometimes it can be tough to think about, well, why are we doing this? Because this was a scene. So like we got to do the scene, right? Because people are expecting to see the scene. So like it can be easy to not ask the why are we doing this question. I think it's really important then, if you're adapting something and if you're making changes, to be not just to, I would say, to be doubly as careful as if you were writing something originally.
Yeah.
Because you're not coming in with like a cohesive understanding of like what you want. It's almost like you're directing on behalf of somebody else. I think one of the most frustrating things that I've done is I've directed a short film where I was not the writer or the vision caster, the primary director.
Yeah.
I was put in a position where I was directing on behalf of somebody else's vision.
Yeah.
And I didn't have necessarily that ability to cast my own vision, and made everything really challenging.
Yeah.
Because every little decision, it's like, well, I don't know what I would do because I'm not the I who would be doing this thing.
Yep.
I'm doing it for this other person.
Yep.
So
It's the communication between the producer, writer, and the director becomes really important then, of like, if this isn't the director's vision, then you need to let them in somehow to make it a shared vision.
exactly. Yeah. You need to have everybody who's at the forefront of making this thing, whatever it is, needs to have stake and say in what happens and why it happens. Because every little decision that gets made has a lasting impact further down the line. We started with the example of Aang can fly now. Cool. What does that do later on? It's that's a question that needs to be answered. And that kind of makes every time they're flying with Appa, it's it's cool. He's fluffy. He's cute, but it's a little less meaningful.
Yeah. I feel like the most egregious example of that, we don't even have to watch it, but the most egregious example of that to me, in terms of how it was structured and feels like not thought through, was when Aang goes to the Fire Nation Avatar Temple and then gets attacked by June. And the only thing, because that can work, except the only thing that I'm sitting there as an audience member left with is, so how did she get her animal across an ocean?
Yeah. Exactly.
How did it track Aang across a massive body of water where tracking scent becomes almost impossible?
Yeah.
And this is a blind animal who only tracks by scent?
Yeah.
How did that happen?
Yeah. I think it's important to some people, these things might feel like nitpicky. Why would you care? Why can't you suspend your disbelief? It's just this thing costs hundreds of millions of dollars. I think if there's any sort of question about why should I care about these little details, I think the question should also be asked about why was this show given so much money?
Yeah.
If I'm supposed to not care about it enough to ask these sorts of questions, then I'm also sort of casting this idea that I don't really think that the writer should have cared about it either. Like those two things go hand in hand. If I'm not supposed to care that much about it, well, then why are you caring so much about making it then,
Yeah.
Those two things go hand in hand.
Yeah. It's like the maybe in a way, the kind of being brushed off of don't think about it too much. How often is that going to end up being a reflection of the people who are making it also not having thought about it all that much?
I think that's 100% exactly it. On that note, do you want to maybe go back to Sokka's sexism for just a second?
Sure, yeah.
I think I understand what you were getting at when you were talking about the warrior mentality of Sokka from an early age. I do think, though, that the reason I would say chauvinistic, or I would push to include that sexist terminology, is because I do think that's an integral part of where his experience meets his character arc in the Nickelodeon version. I think when you talk about the warrior mentalities, I do understand exactly where you're coming from. And also I think there's an interesting dimension where he was the only male left out of being a warrior, left out of going to war.
That's a really good point.
And so now there's like, I wasn't good enough.
How much is that him now questioning his own masculinity?
Exactly. Right? But on top of that, you have now a situation where in the real world of the show that you've set up, you've now left this like 7, 8, 9-year-old kid as the de facto representation of masculinity to everybody else in the village.
Yeah.
So it's like the reason that the sexism ring is so true for me and why I think it's so important is because this is a kid who's had no male role models through the most formative teenage years of his life.
Yeah.
And so when you think about what would somebody default to as like, what am I supposed to be as a man?
Or like evolve into without that guidance.
It would be the most basic, chauvinistic, template stereotype version of what a macho masculine warrior man is.
Yeah.
It's
my dad was in charge.
Yeah.
And so because I'm a man, I'm going to be in charge.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to reference the characteristics of a warrior that I saw in my dad, maybe without, again, when we're looking at Hakoda in the original show, like some actually really other positive traits too that he has.
Yeah. I think what I appreciate about that original sexism piece being so prevalent there is that it doesn't just show a character development, it doesn't just show us a character who's changing over time. It actually makes sense as like that actually is the arc that I could see happening for a kid who is left in that position. There's a realism there. In a way, like that cartoon version feels more real than this live action version. There's a great scene in the original where like Sokka's like telling all these other kids like, oh, like you need to go like defend the Western Wall, do this. And it's just like a bunch of little kids like picking their noses and stuff. And
for what looks like a literal snow sand castle.
Exactly. It's quite literally a visual display of a child playing warrior.
Yeah.
As opposed to like somebody actually being a warrior, which is the journey that he's going on.
Yeah.
They do a similar version of that scene in the live action, but you got a bunch of like tall teenagers thrown in there. You talk about undercutting, just get a bunch of like 5, 6-year-olds. And it's like, it's super easy. I think you brought up a good question before where you said, if you're taking away Sokka's sexism, what are you replacing it with?
Yeah, what's the motivation that you're going to then insert into that space?
Yeah, because I think that original article came out and everybody lost their minds. I think for good reason, but I think my initial reaction to it was that I actually don't mind the idea of them taking away Sokka's sexism as much as I mind the fact that it was clear they had nothing to replace it with.
Yeah, it was about taking it away. It wasn't about replacing it with something better or even just different.
Right. But I think that's a problem in and of itself if we just left it there. But I think it highlights something that I'm really, really concerned with about wider media production as a whole, is that it shows that we are prioritizing politics above story.
Yeah.
And it's just like we are so focused on the political aspect of it, which go ahead. Like by all means, Avatar in and of itself was quite political in its core. We're not saying don't include politics.
Yeah.
But if it's clear that you're doing that at the expense of the story, then you're missing the point.
Well, like if you're gonna be making a political statement, it's really important to have a solid story that props it up.
Yeah.
Right? There needs to be substance behind it. Otherwise, it is going to have that hollow feeling. And you might have an important political message to say, but there needs to be something that actually gives it some momentum and some feeling behind it.
It's so true. You can have politics, but the story needs to drive the politics. The politics can't drive the story. It's like the story is the vehicle that you use to tell what you want to tell. Like imagine a car and you need to get an important ambassador or like a world leader. You need to drive them to a location. Great. The world leader is important. So's the vehicle.
Yeah.
And you would never say, we need to get the president downtown and just be like, let's just grab some random Toyota Corolla from the back of a junkyard. It's like, no, like the vehicle is immensely important. And if the politician is important, if the political message is important, the vehicle that you drive it with needs to be equally important.
If you have an important message, then just like with a politician, your story needs to be bulletproof.
Yeah, good point. I think that's true on multiple levels, because it's like bulletproof also suggests that it's immune to criticism because it's so airtight.
Yeah, and it's because it's not going to be the political message that's immune to criticism, because you're going to have people who are going to disagree with you.
Oh, yeah.
But if your story is good enough, let's say, it doesn't have to be great, doesn't have to be as good as this initial Avatar was on Nick, but like, if your story is at least very good, then not only are you going to be able to maybe avoid criticism of the story and the political message, but I feel like in a lot of ways, having a really good story is actually a way for you to pull your critics in. And if you can get your critics to buy into your story, they're probably significantly more likely to be at least amiable to hearing your message.
Yes.
They're going to give you a fair shake. And so if it is, here's this amazing story, and within that amazing story, here's a political statement that I might not agree with, and I might feel like I have to grapple with, but I'm going to grapple with it because I'm engaged in the story.
Yes.
If it's just about the political message, then that becomes a little bit of a challenge.
100%. I couldn't agree more.
No one is going to be more resistant than when they are feeling preached at.
Yes.
And if it feels like your story is preaching at me, it is the fastest way to tune out from both the story and, more importantly, and unfortunately, to tune out from your political message. A lot of it, I think, whether or not people are intending it this way, but I would imagine if your political message is really valuable to you, it's about, I want to bring in more people to this belief, to this way that I believe structuring the world is going to be beneficial. Let me give you a really amazing story that you buy into first, so that it becomes more palatable to hear something that you would otherwise dismiss on first sight.
Totally. So this was the original piece that sort of illustrated that, like, hey, we're going to remove Sokka's sexism.
Sure.
Which was one piece of it. But the other piece of it that I found far more interesting. So this is taken from an interview done with Albert Kim, who was the executive producer and showrunner for Netflix's Avatar. And a lot was said in this interview, but I wanted to focus on this part in specific. He said, quote, "So for us, it was about striking the right balance of making sure that you were true to the DNA of the original, but at the same time, we wanted to make it a serialized Netflix drama, which meant that it couldn't just be for kids. It also had to appeal to people who are big fans of Game of Thrones.
Yeah.
And it also had to feel grounded and mature and adult in that way too." And that, I think, people lost their minds about the Sokka sexism thing. I just about threw my laptop across the screen when I read
Not at the
that.
sexism piece, but that part.
About the Game of Thrones comment.
Yeah.
I was upset when I read it, and I was doubly upset when I saw this.
Yeah.
Because what came across to me is that they think Game of Thrones is a color grade. It is dark, it is moody, and it is somber.
Yeah.
And it's like, no. I struggled to think about how I could make a more uninformed statement if I tried.
Yeah.
When I read that, I was wondering to myself, okay, are we going to have in Avatar: The Last Airbender, are we going to have people dripping? Are we going to have, and we're going to have, you can see blood? Like, that's what Game of Thrones is.
Yeah.
I was thinking about
brutal.
It's brutal. And so what I was thinking about is, like, if I tried, I don't think I could take one sentence and show that I don't understand two different pieces of media if I tried.
Yeah.
It's like if you were an archer and you shot one arrow and you hit two different targets and neither of them were the ones that you were aiming at.
Exactly.
It's like, and the problem is that this is a feeling that I get from filmmaking as a whole. Like, when I look at the wider, big budget sort of productions that are coming out, I feel like this is the mentality a lot of the time. It's this very disconnected, we're going to take a more data-driven, what's the latest hashtag, what are the kids interested in, sort of
chasing the trend.
Yeah. You don't understand the franchises that you're trying to emulate. It's like if in 5 years we hear that like, okay, Paramount Pictures, we're going to take our crack at Avatar: The Last Airbender, and we know that people really like South Park. And so all they do is they make Avatar, but they have it as the little cardboard cutouts. So it's like, you don't understand South Park. You don't understand Avatar.
Yeah.
It's the reason that South Park is like these little cardboard cutouts and these kids is that they can say some of the most vulgar, crass, disgusting things possible so that they can shed light on some of the weird, political, interesting social dynamics that we take for granted.
Yeah.
In the same way, Game of Thrones is dark, disgusting, horrible to show what does the worst of humanity look like when you're pressed up against the wall. It's like, that's what Game of Thrones is. And you're taking that energy into Avatar, and it makes sense why you've now flattened everything down to this, like, is Aang gonna go on magical adventures and like be a whimsical kid who doesn't, latch on to responsibility? Well, no, because that's not Game of Thrones. That's not what we're going for. We're going for a mature adult audience. And this all just cycles back to like, why did you make Avatar?
Yeah.
Why didn't you just make a cool 4 elemental magic show that's dark and broody that has a message that you want to tell?
Yeah.
You went to Avatar, but you didn't want Avatar. You wanted Avatar: The Last Throne.
Yeah. Yeah. You wanted a Game of Thrones with the Avatar logo on it.
Yes. You wanted to capitalize on the success of 2 different successful entities.
Which is ironic then, because I actually think that your archer shooting an arrow at 2 different targets and missing, in many ways, both of them is actually really accurate, because it certainly does not feel like it captures anything about the Game of Thrones piece. But on the other hand, like, again, the part of that statement that really stands out to me is that we want to make something that appeals to not just kids. Avatar might be the most adult-friendly cartoon that exists on the planet.
Yeah.
Like, you already had something that was enjoyed by adults, not who came out of their childhood, but adults who found the show as adults and enjoyed it.
Yes.
Like, there was nothing that was just for kids about Avatar. But ironically, what you end up doing by trying to make it more mature is that somehow they managed to make the live action less mature than the original animated cartoon. And I feel like a lot of that has to do with the bluntness of the writing, the in-your-faceness, the death of nuance.
Ooh, that's a good phrase.
I don't know if there was some pieces that you caught in watching the original cartoon. One of the things that stands out to me about how well thought out and how well written it was that there is a mirroring effect with the first part of the show and the last part of the show. Where when Aang comes out of the iceberg, there's this giant beam of light that shoots into the air. And then when he spirit bends Ozai to take his bending away, a giant blue beam of light shoots up. Beginning, end, bookmarked beautifully, right? This wonderful visual storytelling that takes place.
Yeah.
And it to me shows you don't do that in Paw Patrol, right? Like, you don't do that in Peppa Pig.
Yeah.
This is where you had some writers who were taking their craft really seriously.
Yeah.
Like, the amount of beautiful details that they have in there. I don't know if you even remember in the episode where they have to suck on the frozen frogs because they're sick, and Momo brings a tiara and puts it on Katara's head.
Yeah.
So that tiara actually also shows up in the swamp when Momo throws it at one of the vine benders.
Oh, really?
You don't see it because it's like for a brief second, but that's the tiara. But if you also look at the tiara, it is also a visual representation of 2 dragons with a sun in the middle, showing Ren and Shaw and how they're going to come to firebending in the last season. Like, in a throwaway thing from a throwaway filler episode, the writers are showing you how they're going to end one of the most important arcs for both Zuko and Aang when it comes to firebending. And it's like, that's the show that you're saying is just for kids.
Yeah.
That's the show that you're saying is not mature enough, right? So it seems like what you have is that you have people who saw Avatar on paper.
Yes.
It's like, this is what it is. This is the breakdown of it. This is our venture capital. Here's these pieces. These are the favorite scenes of the people. In many ways, like, they tell us about what is happening in the show. One of the scenes that really got me for this was, I think it's in episode 4, I don't remember, when they're flying around on Appa and Aang's telling Katara, like, wow, you're a great bender. You're inventing new moves. Like, I have not seen her invent a new move. We have not seen anything about this. All the cool training for bending is taking place off camera. All of your relationship building is taking place off of camera, and you're just telling us about it. It feels like they wrote a show where they tell us about what's happening because they were given a brief by the executives at the studio about what the show is supposed to be.
Yeah. Maybe I'll use it as one more opportunity to say it's probably a really challenging job to replicate a pre-existing piece of media.
Doing an adaptation as a writer, you are doing yourself no favors.
Correct.
That's a hard spot to be in.
So I will 100% say, to begin with, sorry, we're like almost at the end now. I will 100% say, to contextualize this, I can understand and appreciate how difficult it is to try to replicate something that's already amazing and great as it is. And the reason I say that right now specifically is that yesterday I just finished creating a video for my day job at Motion Ray, where I basically tried to break down and replicate the entire filmmaking style of this 20-year-old savant filmmaker out of Mexico who's ridiculously talented. And it was one of the most challenging experiences. I about killed myself.
Wow.
Like trying to make this thing good. And the reason is that I realized in making this that even if I got something kind of cool that I really liked, the best that I can do is mirror or reflect something, because how am I ever going to be a better Gox than Gox?
Yeah.
It's like, I'm not him. And so everything that I'm doing is trying to follow a pre-existing lead, but everything that happens after the fact, like all those little details, like the dragons who are foreshadowing Zuko and Aang's character arcs kind of coming to a completion. It's like, those are things that you have time and energy and mental space for, because everything else is coming out of an organic, genuine place.
Yeah.
You're not looking and trying to write and trying to make all. What you're doing is you're writing from your heart, and now you have leverage and space to be able to do all these other things and build this cohesive thing. But if you're a third party who's coming in and saying, like, what did they do? Like, your first step is trying to figure out, like, what even is, like, the soul that this is coming from?
Yeah.
Like, you're starting from, like, 70 million miles back already.
Yep.
And so the amount of energy that it takes to just get to square one, where even it kind of, like, feels like it represents it accurately.
Yeah.
That's tough in and of itself. And so I can understand, like, why those pieces would be missing. And I don't necessarily like the fact that they had Sozin's comment. Great, cool, lovely, great addition. But I do think that it's a really tough position to try and replicate something that everybody already thinks is great and is already established as top tier. It's like, because the best that you can do is not mess it up, and there's no room to exceed it. Like, you just can't. Yeah. It's not possible. So maybe all that just to say, I know that I've been really tough and really hard and been very critical, but I do have a soul, and I do understand that it's a tough position to be in, and I appreciate all the hard work that did go into making this. So take all my criticisms and negativity with a grain of salt.
So you and I have talked a lot today about, like, the things that went wrong.
Yes.
And we've speculated about why things might have ended up the way that they are.
Yes.
I would like to maybe offer a possibility as to why that happened. So I would like to give you, as I submit to evidence, Exhibit A and Exhibit B. So if you want to take a look at those, let's pull those up on the big screen.
Yes.
So go ahead and read that and see how that goes.
I'll read it out loud. An open letter to Avatar, The Last Airbender fans. This was made 186 weeks ago.
Yeah, a couple years ago.
Wow. Many of you have been asking for updates about Avatar live-action Netflix series. I can finally tell you that I am no longer involved with the project. In June of this year, after 2 years of development work with Bryan.
This is Mike and Bryan.
Yeah.
These are the original creators of Avatar.
In June of this year, after 2 years of development work, Bryan and I made the difficult decision to leave the production. When Bryan and I signed on the project in 2018, we were hired as executive producers and showrunners. Oh, I didn't actually know that. And I knew that okay, interesting. In a joint announcement for the series, Netflix said that it was committed to honoring our vision for this retelling and supporting us in creating the series. And we expressed how excited we were for the opportunity to be at the helm. Unfortunately, things did not go as we hoped. Look, things happen, productions are challenging, unforeseen events arise, plans have to change. And when those things have happened at other points during my career, I try to be like an air nomad and adapt. Oh, that's cool. I do my best to go with the flow no matter what obstacles are put in my way, but even an air nomad knows when it's time to cut their losses and move on.
So you can go to the other one now, which is Bryan's statement about this, which I think fills in some other gaps that are also very interesting.
This is interesting. I didn't get all this information. Okay. This is probably the most difficult decision I've ever made, but there is no doubt in my mind it was absolutely the right choice. When Netflix brought me on board to run the series alongside Mike 2 years ago, they made a very public promise to support our vision. Unfortunately, there was no follow through on that promise.
He's a little bit stronger language than Mike does.
Yeah. Though I got to work with some great individuals both on Netflix's side and on our own small development team, the general handling of the project created what I felt was a negative and unsupportive environment.
So keep going.
That gives context. To be clear, this was not a simple matter of us getting our way. Mike and I are collaborative people. We did not need all of the ideas to come from us. As long as we felt these ideas were in line with the spirit and the integrity of Avatar, we would have happily embraced them. However, we ultimately came to the belief that we would not be able to meaningfully guide the direction of the series.
So that's kind of the crux of what it is. And it leaves two very interesting aspects to me. Like when you brought up Sozin's comment, part of me was like, well, if it's in episode 1, I wonder how much they were still on the project at that point so they could integrate something like that, right?
Oh,
how much is that original writing team responsible for that? Kind of having the vision and saying like, hey, this is important. But the other thing is that specifically in Bryan's statement, he makes a comment that struck me that kind of left me with a question, where he was saying, as long as we felt those ideas were in line with the spirit and the integrity of Avatar. And that left me with two questions. I was wondering, to what degree does an adaptation hold a responsibility to honor the spirit of its original work? And what exactly makes the spirit of an original work? Like when you were talking about the soul of a project, right? When you're writing something original from yourself, you get to the soul of what it is. What makes that? So I think maybe the first question I'd be curious to get your take on is like, what responsibility does an adaptation have to honor the integrity and the spirit of the original work? And to what degree does it have some play?
I guess there's a couple different ways to answer that. The easiest way that I could answer that is that you have no responsibility. It doesn't matter. You can do whatever you want. Go for it. But people are going to react a certain way. So I think if you're talking about what is the responsibility that you hold, one is that the responsibility you hold is to have integrity. And if you made a promise, to follow through on that promise.
So even that original piece of we promise to support the original, we promise to support the creators and they're kind of guiding the helm of this work.
Even leaving the creative piece aside for a moment, just the administrative piece of you made a deal, just follow through on it. So there's a piece of integrity. I think that's actually the bigger responsibility that I would say needs to be held, because you can make a bunch of different, you don't have to stay faithful to the original. I just talked before about how tough it can be to actually try to replicate something.
Yeah.
There's a lot of challenges associated with it. Filmmaking is a collaborative, creative effort.
Yeah.
Everybody in filmmaking has spent years, maybe decades, doing extremely difficult work for extremely little pay because they love being creative and putting themselves into something. And with that comes change. You're going to have something that's going to be different from the original.
Yeah.
So I don't necessarily think that you should be bound by the original. But when you're talking about what responsibility do you have, I think what I think that you're getting about is respect. Is what honor, if you're going to all the trouble to make an adaptation of something, it's probably because you like it. It's probably because you really love it. And so I think that the degree of responsibility that you have in being faithful to an original piece of work is proportional to your love for it.
Yeah. Like, the more that you care about this thing, maybe the more important it is to carry on the spirit of it.
Yeah.
Or even maybe the more likely it is that you're going to carry the spirit on it because you have respect for that original piece of work.
Yeah.
Where, again, when you go back to the Vanity Fair article and it says, want to make something that's more than just for kids, that doesn't sound like a statement that is respectful of the original work.
Yeah.
And grasps the gravity of what it actually is.
Yeah.
Part of why I thought that it was good to talk about the live action Avatar is that there's a fascinating juxtaposition that feels like it's happening. Because 6 months before this was released, Netflix did almost the exact same thing with an 8-episode adaptation of an animated work, and they absolutely nailed it.
Yep.
In the One Piece live action.
Which, interestingly, I had inverse expectations of.
Oh, totally.
I had zero expectation for One Piece being good, and I had way more expectation for Last Airbender being good.
Yeah.
Which is fascinating how it just flipped.
Yep.
And it was exactly the opposite of what ended up happening.
And part of why I feel like it's important to talk about the creators for Avatar were, let's say, found it in their best interest to no longer be part of a project that they care about the IP, which is a challenge. When you go onto the IMDb for One Piece, whose name is right there on the top of the credits as a producer?
Ichiro Oda.
Exactly.
Yep.
And I think a huge component of the success of the show has to do with you have the original creator who is there, maybe not to make every single decision about the characters, but to, at the very least, because I mean, for Oda, like, he is Japanese and this is a show that is filmed and produced in English. So he's not going to have a whole lot of the ability to direct, actors. He's not going to be able to guide a whole bunch of the show, but he can be there to almost be like continuing to make sure that the soul of the series is contained within the show.
Yeah.
Which I think, despite making some changes, they did really well.
Yeah.
There's actually one scene from One Piece that I want to look at.
Yeah, let's take a look.
Because it feels like it really epitomizes a huge difference. And it's not quite about the soul of the show. It's actually more about, like, in terms of a writing team. Somebody ate their Wheaties that morning and was on their A game when they wrote this thing.
Okay.
Pause. That's it.
That's it?
The brilliance of this visual storytelling, communicating so much and making the audience feel something without uttering a single line of dialogue.
Yes.
So contextualized by that last part where Alvida bashes somebody's head in with her maul.
Yeah.
And then how are we as an audience supposed to feel about Kobe here?
That's a good point. Yeah.
Well, let's set him up in a situation that makes us feel the way we're supposed to feel about him. Let's take him, put him in the bottom of this dingy ship at night when everybody else is sleeping. He is still working. He is scrubbing the blood off of her maul with a toothbrush. Like, to me, this calls back to what it really kind of brings up as a parallel image for me is like making somebody scrub a toilet with a toothbrush.
Yeah.
Like, there is something about the tool that you give somebody to use for the job that they are doing that feels like it communicates so much about how you feel about them and how you position them.
Yeah.
So to me, this is like you talked about with Jackie Chan.
I was about to say.
Put somebody in an underdog position and all of a sudden you root for them. Without saying anything, this scene took maybe 5 or 6 seconds.
Yeah.
It says everything that we as the audience need to feel about this character in Kobe. And it spent so little time on it.
It was, you talk about like efficient storytelling,
Yeah.
efficient ways to tell your story. It's
Yeah.
like, this communicates everything. And it's great. Yeah. I talked before about how if you have something that's animated, you're able to get through it a lot quicker.
Yeah.
And I think I want to rephrase that where it's easier to make things happen a lot quicker.
Yeah.
But this example here kind of contextualizes that, where it's like you communicated a lot and it was very fast, but it wasn't like getting through story elements very quickly. It wasn't like going through things very quickly. It was just communicating information, communicating emotion very quickly.
Yeah. And it makes it so that because of the scene, now when Luffy beats up Alvida,
Yeah.
I don't feel bad for her at all.
No.
Because I've
Yeah.
seen what she's making Kobe do.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, I know where to position these characters. It's very opposite Sokka and Suki.
Yeah. And now you actually have a route for Kobe to go too. Because like you feel bad for him. He is a bad guy. He's on the bad guy pirate ship.
Yeah.
And he's eventually going to become a Marine who we think of as the bad
Technically
guys.
the bad guys in the show. Yeah.
But you still love him the whole way through.
Yeah.
And it's sort of like the inverse of like, I was just thinking like Alvida kind of came across a little bit like Suki, to be honest, where it's just like, just mean.
But
Just
because
mean.
she's supposed to be mean.
Exactly.
The writers said, I want her to be mean. Let's do something that makes her look mean.
Yeah. Exactly.
And so they succeeded in making a good villain that way.
And are you saying that you think that this was exclusively the result of Ichiro Oda being a part of the production, or are you talking about this as being just that respect to the original source material?
I think this has a little more to do with the respect, and maybe even, I don't know how much I want to make this comparison, but I can only evaluate based off of the end product. But to me, this says, if not a more talented or a better, then at least a more cohesive,
Yeah.
on the same page writing team.
Yeah.
Because I doubt that Oda said, this is exactly what I want you have you do.
Correct.
This was probably a writer who was brought on who said, hey, I have an idea for how I want this scene to go. And it works great with the original work.
Yeah.
It is different, but it still honors the vision and the spirit of how this one is supposed to go, which is, it's a little bit goofy.
Yeah.
It's kind of silly. It's not trying to be super serious, even though there's like, I mean, in about 10 minutes here, Zoro's going to cut somebody in half.
Yeah.
And so like still some darker, grittier pieces, but it's also not afraid to have the essence of fun.
Yeah.
And the humor that the original one does.
And that's a really tough line to walk. So I wonder how much even just having the knowledge and maybe even be the physical presence of the source of that entire IP, just being around.
Yeah, even as just like a check and balance.
Yeah.
Somebody who isn't going to necessarily say yes or no, but they're like, if he doesn't look at this scene and says there's a problem with it,
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, great, you did awesome.
Yeah.
Go for it. That's your original thought. That's your original idea for this character that fits in line with the spirit of the show.
Yeah.
You worked within your constraints, but you also did something creatively that came from yourself.
Yeah.
Right?
I think you talk about it being cohesive. I think the idea of having the original creator on set acts as an orienting North Star. Just like even if nothing's spoken out loud, like in the back of your head, you see him walking around, you see like, it's like, this is where everything is stemming from. It's like, we're not creating this random unique thing. We're taking something that the source of it was here and we're bringing it into life. There was one moment that I saw kind of broken down in the aftermath of everything where somebody who was setting up the lighting of the scene, because they needed to make it look a certain way. It has a very particular style. It's very like cartoony, but it's also live action. So there's a very particular like lighting that you need to achieve with it. And one of the, I don't remember if it was a lighting tech or the DP, but somebody came up and was like, hey, we need to light this scene a particular way and we want some practical lights to be in the shot. Is there electricity in this world?
Yeah.
And it was actually a question that the person who was telling the story said, Oda actually didn't know the answer. And he's like, I never thought of that.
Yeah.
Because in the world that I created, like I never relied on electricity. Like some stuff is cola powered, some stuff is like lanterns.
Yeah, that's true.
It's like, I didn't even have to question whether electricity was in this universe or not.
Yeah.
And so apparently like he went away and he came back and he helped them like set up like, no, this is actually how we do it. But that's just one little example of like, this is a small detail.
Yeah.
This light in the shot, is it a lantern or is it an incandescent bulb?
Yeah.
Is there electricity? But like that matters. It's not going to matter in the sense that that's going to make everything else collapse if, you make the wrong decision here or there, if it's a light bulb or if it's a lantern.
Yeah.
But what it does is it shows that there is a central node from which the story is coming out of.
Yeah.
Like there's a source that everybody agrees upon. Like this is where the story's coming from. And every decision that we make, including what kind of lights are we using, comes from that central source.
Yeah.
And so when you use the word cohesive, I think that's incredibly accurate because every little decision down to the minute detail passes through, even if you're not asking him directly, it passes through the filter of does Oda approve of it or not.
And it's not a yes or no, but it can be a collaborative piece.
Exactly.
Well, it almost makes me think, because when I originally posed that question of what is the spirit of the original work, I was thinking about like, is it in how you have the character set up? Is it in how you create the scenes? Is it how you write the story? Whatever it is. And maybe there's some pieces of that, but when you and I are talking about this now and you give that example of that interaction, I almost start thinking about it less in terms of a technical story creation way and almost more of a human way. Is, at least in productions like this, does honoring the spirit of the original work really come down to the relationship between the creative team and the original creators?
Yeah.
Like, if that relationship, however much or little involvement is there, if that relationship is solid, is positive, is one where there is give and take back and forth, if that's a good relationship, you're more likely to succeed at creating an adaptation that works. If you have an antagonistic relationship with the creators of the original work, I think that acts as a piece of evidence that you are not going to be able to produce an adaptation that really works. Because the adaptation is always going to be contextualized by its relationship with the original piece.
Yeah.
You can't create an adaptation in many ways. Like you said, it's the difficulty of the writer's job here. You can't create an adaptation that really stands on its own. It will always be compared with the original work. And the honoring the essence or the spirit of that original work is maybe a way that you get to bypass the criticisms of this is different or this isn't quite the way it was before. It's like, no, we're in a different medium. Animation is very different than live action. We can't do things in live action that we could in animation, but we held the spirit of the work.
Yeah.
And that can maybe be the bulletproofing of your story.
Yeah.
So if you have an antagonistic relationship with the original creators of the work, I think that's a good indication that you're probably not going to be able to create a very successful adaptation because you won't be capturing the spirit of it.
I think that's a really, really good point. It makes me think of this kind of old philosophical thought experiment, which we'll call it a philosophical thought experiment about a ship called the Going Merry. And
don't make me cry. Do not make me cry right now. I can't do this. We've gone through a whole episode without either one of us crying.
No, for once,
this is the first one.
For once. Wow, this is a first here. Well, we got a couple minutes left, so we'll
make it work.
Try to make it happen. But no, there's a thought experiment that says that if you have a ship and you have a part of that ship that is a bit defective, and so you take it off and you replace it with a new part.
Yeah.
But you keep that original part.
Yeah.
And then maybe the sail needs to be replaced. And so you take off the original sail, put it to the side, and then you put a new sail on the ship, and then you take the hull, and then you take the keel, and then and at a certain point, you reach a point where you have replaced every single part of that original ship. But not only that, you also have every single original part of the old ship, and you reassemble it together, and now you've got two ships. Which one is the original ship?
Yeah.
You have two things that they are the thing. They're both the ship. And I think the interesting piece that you bring up is that the relationship and can you say it again, actually? How did you put it?
Whether or not you are going to honor the spirit of the original may come down substantially to what is your relationship to the creator of that work.
Yeah. Part of me feels then that, is it actually able to take on the name of the original ship.
Yeah.
I mean, part of that comes down to how much do you feel like it actually embodies and represents that ship? Yeah. What is that ship being used for? Is that a trading ship that went around and brought prosperity to all the surrounding villages? And is it now a ship that's going off to war and is going to cause murder and destruction? Yeah. That doesn't feel like the same ship then. It feels like you've hollowed out and taken the shell of something that used to be that ship, and now it's going off to do something. It's like, that doesn't feel like it. And so almost in a sense, it's subjective and it's kind of dependent on how do we feel about it.
Yeah. I actually think you brought something up very interesting to me with the going merry analogy. Do you remember kind of the crux in that Water 7 arc?
Yes.
Where they're coming to terms with,
give me a sec.
They're coming to terms with the reality that the going merry won't work.
Yeah.
So do you remember what it was that the shipwrights told them was the problem with the going merry?
Was it the keel?
I think it's the keel. I don't know, but it's that bottom piece of the ship.
It runs throughout the entire thing.
Yeah. And they were saying to the crew, once that is cracked, the ship is done. And it's not going to be able to have anything else happen to it.
Yeah.
I feel like there's a phenomenal analogy there where, like, in many ways, the keel is the essence or the spirit of that original component. And I love the keel analogy because it's the part of the boat that is under the water. You do not see it. There's no representation of it on the surface, but you can tell when it is going well and when it is going poorly, right? And it feels like for the Avatar adaptation, it kind of feels like they took some scraps off of a Game of Thrones ship, and they just kind of took Luffy's very terribly painted sails that he tried to make when he was beginning the crew and put them on there and said, "Hey, it's Avatar." But and that's why it feels like it's a hollow shell.
Yeah.
Because that core piece is not there. That keel that undergirds the entire thing, that provides the structure, that carries the spirit of all the adventures that ship goes on to, that's not there.
Yeah.
Whereas it feels in a lot of ways like One Piece is kind of a real redesign of the whole ship, but they kept the keel.
Yeah.
That part is still there. And maybe the keel is, for lack of a better term, maybe that's Oda.
Yeah.
Right?
I think
maybe the keel for Avatar would have been Bryan and Mike if they would have stayed on.
I think that's a really good point. It's kind of interesting too how maybe the Thousand Sunny is the optimal version of what Avatar should have been. Yeah. It's going to be different. Like it looks different.
And that can be hard for people who love the original to get
to.
Yeah.
You might never love the Thousand Sunny as much as the Going Merry. And I would probably be in the same camp as those people.
Yeah.
But I don't think it matters because both of those ships... I said we weren't going to cry.
We got it.
How is this happening? It's a ship. I'm crying over a ship.
You're not the only one.
This is so stupid. It's a ship. They're both carrying the crew.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's like...
Yeah.
Both of them are doing their thing.
Yeah.
They're each playing a really important role, and they don't care about competing with each other.
Yeah.
The Thousand Sunny was never trying to outdo the Going Merry.
Yeah.
It was serving the purpose of taking these characters that we love on the adventure and the journey that we love.
Yeah. And there's a real cool thing then with the way that they treated the Going Merry when it goes down, when the literal spirit of the ship comes up. There's something cool about the relationship that maybe Usopp specifically, but all the characters have with the ship, that it does feel like they carry on to the Thousand Sunny.
Yeah.
And so even when the original is lost, it is because of the characters that are being carried by that ship. They carry the spirit with them.
Yeah.
And whatever that looks like, maybe that's like your respect for what the original author did. And so you create something totally different, but we say, hey, we're still taking at the very least our memories of growing up with this show, how it made us feel, right? The respect and reverence for what this thing can do and how hard it worked. That's what we're carrying into this new adaptation, and that's going to be the fuel that, like, even, and maybe starting to kind of feel like this is a perfect analogy, how even Frankie, somebody who did not have a relationship with the Going Merry, was able to create something out of his own heart and soul that was so beautiful. It was his greatest work because of how he saw the rest of the Straw Hats loving the Going Merry.
Yeah.
He said, I'm going to take that as inspiration, and that's what I'm going to use to create my work that honors the original work.
And you know what's so cool about that is that the reason that we love it so much, both of those ships, isn't the ship itself as much as it is the people on board. So how much is that true that like the IP is the IP? How much of our love for it is going to be dictated by the ship itself versus the people on board?
Yeah.
And so when you're talking about the original creators kind of being released from the Avatar remake, it's like, I don't see the people that I love on board.
Yeah. Yeah. No matter how hard the actors might try and succeed in some ways to bring those characters on board.
And have done really great work.
Yeah. They were never, they tried to do a recreation, but they were never handed off like a baton.
Yeah.
The spirit of the original.
Yeah. You did an amazing job. It's just really unfortunate that the keel was never given to you.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, that being said, it makes me think that going into the future, the only way that I would probably watch season 2 is if Bryan and Mike end up coming back on. I doubt it, which is why I probably won't. But if they're able to, or maybe we see something else where we see like that respect and reverence for the original work, that would give me more hope that they're going to give the actors, the crew, the editors, they're going to give the rest of the team more of the spirit to work with. And if we see evidence of that, then maybe I'll give season 2 a shot. How are they going to treat Toph? That is my biggest question. If you can do Toph well, maybe you can get me back on board.
Yeah. I think that's a really fair place to leave it in. Is there any, beyond Mike and Bryan coming back, are there any tangible things that you would like to see different about season 2, book 2, that would maybe be concrete tactile changes that you could land on?
Yeah, that's a good idea, actually, specific, detailed. So I would say use the Kobe scene as reference, more visual storytelling.
Yes.
More pieces like that would make it significantly better. And I think doing that would actually help another problem, which is find a way to make it not feel like it is both rushed in terms of pacing. Find a way to make it not feel like it's both rushed and crawling at the same time.
Yes.
Because that was the experience for me. It was like, this is way too fast and way too slow.
It's interesting then that the mantra in filmmaking is hurry up and wait.
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, that's exactly it though, right? It's like, are there things that you can do in the filmmaking process that can help tell more with less, which will then help you slow the pace to actually get more connection with those characters and give the spirit space to breathe?
Yeah. I would be totally fine seeing less scenes if the scenes that are shown are more faithful to the original.
Yeah. Scene quality over, like, don't try to cram in all the references.
Yeah.
We don't need the Cave of Two Lovers. We don't even, I would even be fine if like Jet and the Mechanist were gone.
Yeah.
Right? Like, great that they tried.
Yeah.
But if putting in too many things, like, totally blands out the soup, get rid of some of that stuff. Right? You don't need everything if you do a handful of things really well.
100%. Other thing that I would add in, character arcs. I think I'm shocked by how much I'm seeing crop up, not just in Avatar, but in wider media as a whole, this incessant need to have characters in an emulatable state from day one. Like, we need to remove the negative characteristics from a character so that if a child is going to latch onto this character, they need to be latching onto a good character, somebody who's responsible, but it's like, no, the thing that is more important than them being in a state that's emulatable is for you to see their journey getting to the place where they need to be. If your character has nowhere to grow, then there's nowhere for them to go from a narrative sense.
Absolutely.
So having characters that have well-rounded arcs. Like, it's okay for them to have flaws. We want to see where they end up, and we want to see the journey of them getting there, not just them being cool, being strong, being powerful, being courageous, being a leader. We need to show them getting to that place for it to be believable.
That feels to me like if maybe we were going to leave it with 2 suggestions, it sounds like between both of ours, it's reconnect or reconcile your relationship with the creators. Even if not the people, then at least the original work itself.
The idea of it.
And have some faith in your audience.
Yeah.
Respect your audience with the idea that they don't need to be spoon-fed the end result message. Like, let them go through a journey with the character and trust that if the character is not all good, isn't at a place being perfectly emulatable yet, trust that your audience is going to be able to see that. Like, we are here for the journey. We are not here looking for people who we need to be.
Yeah. That will happen organically if it's a well-written character to begin with.
Exactly.
I think I came into this ready to just hate on the series, and I think the tone that you pushed for, I think I really appreciate with it. Having constructive reasoning and sort of getting into the mindset about, like, maybe why did these things happen to begin with?
Yeah.
Even, comments that you had about, like, stirring the pot, kind of too many things going on, trying too much to do too many different things. And that even goes into the whole idea about, like, we were trying to be Game of Thrones, we were trying to be an adult audience, we were trying to not just be, it's like, you're trying to do too many things.
Yeah.
And so I think there might be some good reasons as to why some of those things happened that I hope get addressed for the 2nd and 3rd seasons that have now been officially announced. But only time will tell.
Yeah. I feel like, honestly, I think the best critics are ones who are on the side of the people who they're criticizing.
Yeah, I want everything to go amazing with these productions.
Yeah. The writers who are on this team, like, it would be great for them to succeed.
Yeah.
I would love to see them do well, perform well, write something awesome.
Yeah. There's no animosity. I'm not rooting for the downfall of the show.
Yeah.
I'm sad because it didn't end up the way that I think it really could have.
Yeah. So it's like, here's the thing that you produce. And then as a part of this dialogue, here's the feedback that we give you. It would be awesome if you took any of these pieces of feedback that felt like they stuck. This is me talking, assuming that any of the creators are ever going to see this. But, like,
oh yeah, Netflix is totally watching this right now.
But, like, if the creators or if anybody else,
3,000 subscribers, they're paying attention to us for sure.
If any of the creators of any works feel like they resonate with any of the things that we're saying, like, this is the feedback of, here's the experience we have. You can utilize this to your advantage and use it to shift and hone your craft until we get that, like, the resonance between us of, even if I don't agree, even if I would have chosen something different, even if the messaging isn't what I would say, it's like, but you guys nailed it. You creatively did something awesome.
Yeah.
So congratulations to you, right?
Guys, thank you so much for joining us on this journey. It's been a bit of a roller coaster. We've gone through things that we disliked. We've gone through things that we appreciated. We've gone through things that we thought could have been done better. We went through One Piece's adaptation and the differences between those, and we even cried at the very end, or at least I did, even though I said explicitly that I wasn't going to.
Well, you got to keep us on this track, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's a thing now.
We've got to keep wherever the counter is on your wall, days since last cried at 0.
Yeah, exactly. Is the spirit of this podcast the fact that I'm always in tears 24/7?
Yes. If any of you guys are going to rip off our podcast, you have to cry every single time.
Exactly. But yeah, guys, thanks so much for joining us on this journey. Let us know in the comments if you disagreed with us, if you love the Netflix adaptation of Avatar. Let us know. Tell us what you think we got wrong, maybe what you got right, what you agreed with, what you disagreed with.
I would love to see, what are your suggestions? Like we were saying, what we would change in some scenes to make things different. How would you change some of the scenes to get more towards the spirit of the original?
Yeah. Bring out that inner writer and tell us what you would have done differently.
Absolutely.
Awesome. But guys, on that note, please like and subscribe. You brought us to 3,000 subscribers so quickly.
Thank you very much.
Faster than any of us would have expected. Your vehemently passionate love for storytelling has brought us part of the way there. And let's be honest, a big piece of that was also Senor Pink. So thank you to all the Senor Pink fans out there.
Shout out Soother Gang.
You are more hard-boiled than anybody else. The Soother Gang, is that... Oh no, that's a nickname that I don't think I want to stick. But guys, thanks so much. Can't wait to see you next time. Can't wait to see you in the next episode.
We'll see you soon.